This happened some number of years ago, maybe around 2012 or so. I was giving a friend a ride home from another friend's house. I knew of a shortcut down a back road, and I decided to take it because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd been down this way several times. I knew it like the back of my hand. But after driving for some time, it dawned on me just how long we'd been driving for. Definitely longer than it had ever been when I had gone that way. The road had all of the familiar bends and turns, but none of the familiar landmarks. The headlights seemed to be almost absorbed by the darkness. Think about how your headlights are absorbed by fog, only there was no fog. I guess it was just that dark. After about 15 minutes, we finally got out of the void. We'd ended up in another town, in the exact opposite direction of where we were supposed to be headed. I drive a taxi for a living. One night, at around 9 p.m., I saw this elderly woman staggering along the sidewalk. Her back was unnaturally arched in, kind of like the reverse of a hunchback. Her hands were flopping about in almost like a T-Rex type of pose. She saw me and started picking up the pace in my direction. Thinking she may need to go to a hospital or something, I stopped and let her in. I asked her where she wanted me to go, and she leaned up into the front seat. Her eyes were bugged out and yellow, her mouth all shriveled up. She smelled rotted. She just pointed ahead and grunted. We drove around for about 15 minutes, with her tapping my left or right shoulder to give me directions. The whole time, I heard nothing but grunts and the whistling of her breath in my ear. Suddenly, she slapped my chest and I hit the brakes. She opened the door and got out, and staggered away into a nearby alley in a stilted, almost mechanical fashion. I didn't bother charging her. I was too afraid to. One night, around midnight, I was driving around looking for something to eat. I was hungry, but I live a ways from the nearest of all fast food places, so it's a good 20-minute drive without traffic. I was on the way there, on this long stretch of road with all the streetlights out. Normally it was a pretty chill ride. But this time, I started hearing this whistling from the back seat. Like eerie horror movie whistling. It lasted about half a minute. No lights around me or in the car. I couldn't see in the back, and eventually the whistling stopped. A minute later, I saw the only working streetlight up ahead. As I drove by, I looked in the rearview mirror. There was a big scratch on the back window, on the inside. When I was 20, I was driving back to college after a vacation. I was taking a bit of a non-traditional route, going through small towns and pockets of nothingness. I was pretty tired, so I decided to stop at the next gas station and get some coffee. When I parked, I noticed a man outside staring at me. I walked inside quickly, and as I was filling up my coffee, I could see him out there still looking at me. His gaze followed me as I walked up to the till. I paid and told the cashier that I was worried about it. He looked at me all weird and walked me outside. When we got there, I could see why. The dude was nowhere to be found. It was weird, but oh well. I got off and once again started driving into that open road of nothingness. But after driving for a while, I could see something up ahead in the road. I had to slow down because it was blocking my way. As I made to go around it, I saw that it was the man I had seen earlier. I sped past him, freaking out. I looked in the rear view and could see him running after the vehicle. I mashed on the accelerator and got out of there. As soon as I got to the next hotel, I decided to stop for the night. In the morning, I ended up telling the clerk. He just kind of smiled to himself and said, Yeah, every year about this time, a young girl is bound to come in here and tell that same story. One late night, I was out driving in Wyoming, between nowhere and nowhere. I was a long ways from anywhere and was starting to nod off. I parked at a rest area and leaned back to try and get some sleep. The next thing I know, the car starts shaking in its space. Instinctively, I slammed on the brakes, and the shaking stopped. It was a clear moonlit night, but as I looked around, I couldn't see anything. I also noticed that the parking brake was still set. I got out and looked around, and once again, nothing to see. Except for one thing. I wasn't parked as I had remembered parking. Near as I could tell, I was in the same spot, but the car was turned around 180 degrees. Man, I still don't know what to think about that one.